On November 2021, I was 36 weeks pregnant at that time. We were really happy, celebrating, receiving gifts from friends, getting everything prepared and anticipating the arrival of our first baby. What happened was one day I just suddenly had fever at night and I started shivering. I messaged the doctor. She said, just take Panadol, but if your fever hit above 38, then come to the emergency ward. And I thought, okay, maybe after I vomit, I'll feel better. So the next morning I woke up, I felt, oh, I think I'm okay already. So I wasn't worried. Then suddenly the fever came again and I started shaking very heavily again. Galvin was working from home and he was in a meeting and I told him, I think we need to go to the hospital. And then I was there for a few hours. Later on, they say, I have to admit you. The doctor came and said, as long as you don't have fever for 24 hours after this, they think that it's food poisoning, you can be discharged. The next day, the doctor came and said, Xiao Cheng, we cannot discharge you today. Your platelet dropped to 60 plus now, and a normal person will have it at 150 to 400. So your level is at 60 plus. It's actually very dangerous for you and very dangerous for the baby. She said, I have to be on standby to deliver your baby through C-section if this is going to drop further because it's scary. She told me it's scary. And then she walked off. I was like, okay. And she referred me to a physician. So the physician came and said, this is sepsis. Sepsis is basically a body's extreme reaction to bacterial infection. And the death rate of sepsis is actually also quite high. Every time I will have fever, my body will keep shaking and I couldn't control and my body will be very sore. I will feel very worried because I wanted my baby inside to be okay, and I also don't want to have fever because fever is not good for her. And eventually they found out the infection was actually in my blood, but they have run a few courses of antibiotics to use. Eventually they used one of the strongest antibiotics to make sure everything was clear. I was discharged 7 days later and I get to rest at home and recover. And then 3 weeks later, I gave birth to a full-term healthy baby through natural birth. There were many things that happened and which I thought God really took care of me in all the details and the little things. The physician originally wanted to put me in the HDU, the high dependency unit, and my gynae actually said no to that. In the postnatal ward, I won't be isolated and my husband Galvin could stay with me when I was staying there. And every time when I have fever, when I start shivering, Galvin will hug me and he will pray over me. And also he brought his iPad. We could join Sunday service and worship God together. I think one thing that I always knew of being in a community of believers is that iron sharpens iron. You will strengthen each other's faith. And when I was in the hospital, and originally I didn't even think that it was so serious that I need to tell others. But when the words got out, people started calling me, texting me, and sending me prayers. And it was during that time that I really experienced the power of being in a community of believers. And the second thing that I really learned was, so we already thought of naming our daughter Lainey Faith Wong even before that. Her middle name Faith really got me reflecting a lot about my own faith and my walk with God during that time, when I really slow down and have that 7 days to really reflect. And the verse that really stood out to me during that time was, for we live by faith and not by sight. And I keep thinking, what does it really mean that we need to live by faith and not by sight? You know, our life and every single breath that we take is by God. And the baby in my womb was given by God. Our life on earth are not to be taken for granted. Our faith is not to be taken for granted. That lesson really has taught me to really keep the faith and keep running the race and don't take any moment on earth for granted. And this is the story that I will tell to my daughter when she grows up.